set it up now. So I sent you another presentation. So the first presentation.
Like I set up all of them in different desktops for this one.
Okay.
So you just need to open. Oh, this is just a PDF.
Yes.
You just need to open this one for this screen.
How do I? Can you do that? So you can put that one on. Ah, okay.
So after.
Okay, so let's see. Does it work to?
You need to click on it. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great.
This is your
Yes. So, and will I have presenter notes? Can you see that?
We can test it out. I didn't add any presenter.
How do you? Okay, 4.
Yeah.
Does it? But I don't see presenter notes.
Maybe it's like some kind of.
Yeah, I think it's a setting.
I built it on the system. It's much better.
No, not that.
That one is so present display.
No. Center notes. Ding. Okay, great. Now we can. Oh, where is the screen? Is it up or up? Okay. Great. Thanks. So you can check the audio with YouTube, for instance. All right, so I'm going to start. Hello everyone, welcome to Flutter Stockholm, the first edition of 2023. I'm super excited that so many of you could make it here, and welcome of course to the Done office. So I'm Alek, and I'm running Flutter Stockholm together with Victor, who's also here in the audience, here in the back. Yeah, we have a Slack group for the Meetup. So unless you've joined already, you can use this QR code or go to bit.ly/Flutter Stockholm. Also, we have diversity seats for women. So anytime if you have a female colleague or so who wants to go, but there's a waiting list, as long as you're on the waiting list on the day, you will get automatically promoted so that you get a spot. And also we would love if people would help out with stuff. So for instance, we're looking for somebody who can help us with video editing of all the videos that we're filming every meetup. Also, we're looking for event photographers to take great photos during the events, and for a social media manager who can help us out to spread the word out on the internets. Yes, this was that slide. I wasn't sure I had it. So tonight, first of all, we're gonna have a few talks. So I'm gonna talk about a bit about Done, what we do at Done, how we use Flutter and Firebase, a bit about the business case for Flutter and Firebase from a startup perspective, but also how you can save and reduce your costs if you're using Firebase. Then we're gonna have John, also part of the Done team, who's going to talk about full text search with Meilisearch. And then after a short break, Ayman, who's currently piloting the stream, is going to talk about architecture and common pitfalls with video calls. So yeah, since we don't have an event photographer, please take photos. You can upload them and tweet mentioning at Flutter Sweden. You can also upload them in Meetup. And as you might have noticed, we have a streaming rig, so anytime you miss out on the Meetup itself, you can always rewatch it later or watch it live on YouTube. Yeah, I think that was it. So now I'm going to turn over to my other presentation. So, I'm Alek. I'm one of the co-founders and the CTO at Done. And I'm going to talk about the business case for Flutter and Firebase. And with us tonight, we also have Ayman and John, which are both engineers on the Done team. Fredrik unfortunately couldn't make it. And then Malin, our CEO, is in the back taking photos, and she has prepared amazing snacks for us tonight. I've heard that we got some good reviews on those, so good job, Malin. Thanks. Okay, so this talk is going to be about three things. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about Done, what we do, about our app, how we built it, and then we're going to go into the main portion of the talk. So first of all, what is Done? Well, we're a business which connects homeowners with local craftsmen for anything that they want to get done at home. So either you can book services and book video calls to get quotes through our app or on our website. And we also have a lot of partnerships with retailers who have goods that need installation in order to sell them. So I'm going to get into that in just a slide or two. So here's our site. You can go to doneservices.se, and we have electricians, plumbers, carpenters, painters, anything you need for your renovation needs. And then some of the partners we work with are currently we do a lot of EV charger installers, So for instance, with Evify and elbilsforhuset.se, these are online retailers who sell car chargers online. And then we have an installer network all over Sweden almost, where we can help these retailers to sell their products in Luleå and have somebody in Luleå install that for them. So we work with local craftsmen who join our platform, and through our app they can take jobs and they get paid, and we handle all their administration for them. So we started out in 2019, just when Flutter 1.0 was released, and took a big bet to go with Flutter to really bet our entire startup, because if you fail with your product, you're dead. So it was a big bet that has been paying off tremendously, and I love that we took the choice now. As mentioned, we have coverage all from Luleå down to the southern parts of Skåne. We do about 500 home projects a month currently, steadily growing, and we have around 17,000 monthly active users. So remember this, because it's not a huge number, right? We're not a social media app who needs to have millions of users globally. We're not trying to do a new Slack or TikTok or Instagram, but rather we have users in our local vicinity here in Sweden who all use our service to get something done in their homes as opposed to something done in their apps. So our apps are built to support that service. So our app is out on iOS, Android, and web. So on web we have both a mobile and a desktop client. So the desktop client is used by some of our craftsmen who have a lot of staff, and they might want to do some of their communication at home, but most of them just use the mobile app. And in there we have a bunch of different features to facilitate communication, because that's all that we do. We match an incoming customer with their needs with a local craftsman, and then we help these two to communicate and to get their project done. And we do that through video calls that Ayman is going to talk about later. And we do that with quotation tools, with automatic invoicing, and we also help the craftsman to kind of organize all their customers so they don't forget about somebody. So looking at how we built the app, we use Melos that Mr. Spydon over here in the back talked about in the last meetup to organize our apps. We have 5 internal packages on 2 apps, and then a bunch of external packages. Just to give a number, 71 packages. So I guess it's quite a lot. Maybe we should trim it down. There's about 24 routes in the app, and with Firebase we use 45 Firestore collections and sub-collections, and we have almost 100. I was shocked when I counted this morning, but almost 100 cloud functions deployed. So as mentioned, we use Melos to separate the UI from the model and from the app logic into separate packages. So we have one UI package where all just only have UI components which know nothing about data. We have app logic in one package, and we have models in one package, which represents our Firestore documents. And then we use a package called GoRouter to navigate. And maybe you're going to see a talk from either Ayman or somebody else on our team about that later. And even though we have 2 quite different target groups of users for our app, both customers and craftsmen, they actually both use the same application, and rather we just toggle with Firebase login. When they log in, if they're a craftsman user, they see the craftsman interface and vice versa, so that it's easy for everyone to just use the same app. So you might be wondering, okay, so what kind of state management solution are you using? Because that seems to be like the #1 question that pops up in the Flutter community. And it's actually kind of like a non-question for us, because we don't use block extensively, we don't use readerpod extensively. Rather, we try to store as much state as possible in Firestore. And what's great about Firestore is that you always have a real-time connection to the database, so we can use that to update state in the apps, and the apps always listens to relevant documents through stream builders. So here's an example of how one of our screens works. So we have just a simple stream builder, and it listens for a query snapshot for chat messages. So this shows a chat. And then you can see that from an incoming job parameter, we have the latest messages stream, and we just listen to that and display a list view. And this is mostly how state is run in the app. And if you want to know more about like this kind of approach, I made a talk on this earlier, and there's also a video on YouTube called Eliminate Flutter State with Firestore that you can check out. Okay, so the business case for building with Flutter and Firebase in a startup. So this talk really came about after kind of like listening in on this kind of conversation quite often. Like a lot of people say that Firebase is great, but it gets expensive as you scale. And I think, unfortunately, this is kind of a misguided sentiment, because it really depends on what kind of business you run. And as developers, I think that often we're kind of built to optimize things. We always want to optimize. So when we see a cost, we want to optimize. We want to find the cheapest way of doing something. Might use free accounts or your trial accounts to get something cheaper to avoid having to pay like a monthly subscription. And we don't often value enough our own time as developers. And in a startup, often the case is that your absolutely most valuable resource is time. And it comes from two directions, both on the cost. From the cost perspective, usually your biggest cost in an early stage startup is developer hours, developer cost, either if you have in-house developers who are taking salaries, or if you are outsourcing and have consultants. And then from the other side of the table, what the development team produces is usually what is holding you back from acquiring more revenue, right? As soon as you ship your product, that's when you can start making money. So in a twofold way, the time it takes for a developer to get the product out is really the biggest, what affects cost the biggest. So the earlier you can finish your product and get customers, the earlier you can start getting revenue, and the earlier you can cover the costs of your development team and live and prosper instead of dying. And also, usually, most startups nowadays sell something and get paid, either goods or services in the physical world. So companies like Uber and Airbnb, they're not selling an app, they're selling a service which they get paid for. And with software as a service, then you're also selling something. Then in that case, you are actually selling your software, but since you are getting paid, usually your server costs are covered for. So if you look at us, our challenge at Done and why we chose Flutter and Firebase, we needed to build two apps at the same time, Customer and Craftsman, because both needed to talk together. And actually we needed to build 4 apps because we needed to do it on iOS and Android. So doing it in native was really not an option, because it would 2 to 3x our costs and our time to market. We needed to get something out, to get it in the hands of users, test it, and to start getting some revenue. And really, Flutter, I think, is the first ever that I've seen works in real time, which is using this write once, deploy everywhere paradigm. And as an added bonus, when we started out with Flutter, there was only mobile, so there was only iOS and Android. And then after a year, suddenly we had Flutter Web in beta, and we tried it out, and now we got a desktop app for free that some of our Craftsman users were asking for. But then, of course, I'm a mobile developer. I've been a mobile developer for 10 years. Never been a backend developer. And of course, we're like, oh shit, we need a backend too. What are we going to do? And this is why we chose Firebase. And now that we have grown as a company, and we're still a small team, we're only 4 people, but since Firebase is quite easily accessible as a front-end engineer, since you don't have to think about orchestrating your servers, you don't have to think about server loads, load balancing, Docker containers, all of that stuff. You just write your application code in the cloud. It makes it quite easy for front-end engineers to kind of adapt and become full-stack engineers. So in our team, everybody works across the full stack, which is great. And we also chose it because it's real-time by default, which really helps out in a lot of cases. You never have to think about refreshing data because you're always getting streams with new data in, and it enables a lot of patterns, making things like real-time chat a breeze, for instance. So here's a really candid look at our own GCP costs, and as you can see, like now when we're at the scale we're currently, where we're kind of self-sustainable, we pay just below 8,000 crowns a month. And if you compare that, a quick question from Martin.
What is
the spike in March, I think that was, yeah, so with Firebase, the downside is, since you have endless scale, it's really easy to shoot yourself in the foot or blow your entire leg off. So that's something you have to be careful about. Yeah, but it didn't kill us. This was like 2,000 crowns. It's okay. A developer costs maybe, from 3,000 to 10,000 to $15,000 a month. So it's a minuscule cost. Yeah, for maybe not everybody takes $15,000 a month, but for maybe enterprise architects. But if you compare that to our revenue, you can see for the same time period that it doesn't follow the server costs as like linearly, right? So it means that we're actually, the server cost becomes less and less and less of a problem. Yeah.
Are you doing some optimizations on your data flow to keep the server costs down, or is this just your regular?
We have done some small things, but we have spent very, very little time on this, and I'll come into this this aspect more. So, okay, how do you get revenue in a business, in a startup? Well, you provide value to customers, right? And by trying to optimize your server costs, you're taking time away from doing that. So in a lot of times, it doesn't make sense. As you saw in the slide, one slide back, if we have server cost of 2,000 to 4,000 crowns a month, it doesn't make sense to have developers spend a week of time to try to lower that cost by 20%. And the huge caveat to this is, of course, if you're building something like a social media app where you need massive scale with millions of users before you get any kind of revenue. And in that case, you really need to think about how your server costs are going to affect your business before that. And one recent example is, of course, ChatGPT, which is, OpenAI is a huge business. ChatGPT is a service which needs huge amounts of server processing power. But if you have enough cash in the bank, you can make a marketing stunt like that, having it free for a couple of months so everybody gets hyped, and then you start charging money for it. But I don't think that's in the realm of most startups. So in conclusion, spending time to optimize costs instead of adding customer value in an early stage startup is a path leading to death, which is why I think the sentiment that Firebase is expensive doesn't really hold up. So over to some cost saving tips with Firebase. So the biggest cost you're going to have by far if you use Firestore is document reads. And if you look at the costs for reads versus writes, one write costs as much as 3 reads, which is actually not that bad, because reads are usually far more frequent. If you have a chat, the user is gonna read the same message probably 10 times before they write the next one, with a lot of other items like that as well. So you can try to save reads by using writes and by embracing NoSQL, since Firestore is a NoSQL database. So how do you do that? Try to denormalize to avoid chains of fetches. So instead of having a document which points to another document, which points to another document, and now you need 3 reads to get the data you need for a screen, try to cache some of that inside of the first document. I'm going to give you some examples of that. You can also try to bundle data on screens. So I think the maximum size for a Firestore document is 1 megabyte, which is huge. And 1 megabyte costs just 1 read to get from the database still. So if you get 10 reads, 10 documents to 1 document, you've saved 10x. But just remember, don't overdo it. So here's an example in our app where we trade reads for writes. So here's a screen for our craftsman where they see their conversations with all the different customers, and as you can see, it shows the latest message for each customer. So the naive approach to this would be to, for each conversation, fetch the latest message and then fetch the username and profile picture, because in the message you save a reference to who created the message. And if you do that, to get this screen, you need 2 times the number of conversation of reads, right? So you have a craftsman who has 20 conversations, that's 40 reads, and they might enter this screen 10 times a day. And you have 100 craftsmen, and then you have hundreds of thousands of reads. So what we did instead is an alternate approach, 1 read for the entire screen. So instead, we have a document per craftsman, per company, which has a map called conversations. In that map, we have a field per conversation, which saves the last message and which saves the customer name, so we don't have to fetch it. So since we're now caching things, we need to update, right? So we need to think about how often would we need to update. And in this case, we need to update, of course, when you get a new message, and anytime a username or profile picture updates, which is very seldom, so especially in our case. And we also save a read status. So you couldn't see it on this screen, but on unread messages, we also show a little badge. So anytime the customer or the craftsman goes in and checks a conversation, we need to update that status as well. But we got down from 40 reads to 1 read. So another cost-saving tip with cloud functions. So anybody who's used cloud functions know that they have very slow cold start times. Sometimes it can take up to 10 seconds, even up to 20 seconds to run a cloud function the first time. So the remedy for that is that you can set a min instance, which means that Firebase will always have a machine ready for you in the cloud. It's going to be running 24/7, and it's always going to be ready for requests, so you never get a cold start. But this actually costs quite a lot of money. It costs in the rough neighborhood of like 100 to 150 crowns, I think, something like that, per instance. So if you have, like we have 100 functions, that would be 100 times that. So an alternate approach you can do is to use Firestore. And you can use the producer-consumer pattern, which works great with Firestore and Cloud Functions. So what you do, okay, we saw the animation again. What you do is basically like this. You represent your request with a document in Firestore. So the client, instead of pushing a button and then you call a function and you wait for the response, you create a document for whatever you're trying to do that represents this request in Firestore. You have a cloud function which runs on create. So it's going to run, and it might take time. It might take up to 10 seconds for that function to start up. But you don't need to block the UI. The user can do something else. And in the client, you just wait for updates on that document. And then when the cloud function has finished, it can send back, it can set a new state on the document, like status completed, and you can refresh your UI with a stream builder. And a great example of this is with Firebase extensions. If you look at the code for the email extension, it does exactly this. So when you send an email, you add the document to an emails collection, and then there's a cloud function which always checks for documents in that collection, takes the document which contains like the body and who to send the email to, send off the email, and then it marks the status as completed. This is a great pattern to use. So in conclusion, you can relax. Firebase won't kill your startup. The cost won't eat you alive. Unless you're planning for millions of free users, then you have a problem. Just keep your Firestore reads in check. And another, like a bonus slide, is that there's also this Google for Startups cloud program. And we've heard from a Google representative that they're about to do some changes to this program. So if you want to sign up, you should do it like before February. Where they have a start tier and a scale tier. So you can apply for the start tier and you get $2,000 in Google Cloud credits. And if you're a more mature startup, you can apply for the scale tier and you get $100,000 in credits. You're not going to run out of that. So if you're planning on doing a startup with Firebase, I would highly recommend you to sign up for this program. So that was it for me. Thank you. Any questions?
Did you look at Ionic?
I'm going to repeat the question for the stream. So if I look at Ionic, I have, but since I've been a native mobile developer from the start, I've always kind of like been aware of these web-based frameworks which uses web renderers. So I've been using frameworks like Cordova in the past. I haven't used Ionic specifically. I think nowadays there's like an Ionic native kind of thing, right? Which kind of works like React Native, I guess. But does it still use JavaScript in the bottom? Yeah, so the problem with JavaScript that also is shared with React Native is that you have to cross that JavaScript bridge, especially in iOS, where you go from an isolated JavaScript thread, and that talks to native code, and it adds a bit of delay. We never explored Ionic fully, but yeah, Flutter has been working out super well for us. Question in the back?
Yeah. How long did it take for you to go from idea to first revenue?
Okay, so how long did it take for us to go from idea to revenue? So we started working on the idea in January, and we were committed to the idea in March, and in May we had our first MVP, but that was really MVP. That was basically like a type form as a booking form, and then to try out the business model, we didn't even have an app. We just called people and told them, like, do you have an iPhone? Okay, do you have an iPhone? No? Okay, then you two use like WhatsApp, and you call each other, and then we managed the process. I think our first MVP app, which was using Flutter, we rolled out in June, so from March to June, and then I was the lone developer, and we had some consultants working part-time and so forth. Yeah, of course. I'm not that kind of, 100 hours a week kind of guy. Martin?
But we have inadequate question, but how often do you release? And how does that process kind of go for multiple platforms?
Yeah, so the question is, how often do we release and how do we do releases? And I think that's currently one of the pain points that we have, because we haven't fully automated our distribution process. So release once every 2 weeks on average, I would say, and it's quite manual at this point in time. So we have some integrations with GitHub Actions for running tests and generating the builds, but then we send the builds manually to App Store and Play Store. So yeah, still something to work on.
This is the part that I'm really interested in. How do you work with the secret management for the separate stores? Does Flutter have a setup for this, or do you have your own thing, or manual, or like the key store and the signing certificates for the stores?
Yeah, so in terms of signing certificates for the stores, since we are a small team, we handle it very manually. We have individually passed keys among us, and everybody has one on their computer. That's kind of how it works. I think we had a question over here first.
What are your backup strategies when it comes to your data on Firestore? Because once you've made one mistake, it's very difficult to convert.
That's a super great question. So how do we back up data on Firestore? So we have a cloud function that runs on a schedule, which uses a bulk Firestore exporter tool. There's actually a good article on that, I think, in the documentation for Firestore. So we use that to export the entire database in a bunch of JSON files. But also, apart from that, we also have continuous exports to Google BigQuery, which we use for like analytics dashboards and other stuff like that. So we also have the data replicated there. No, we do the backup is hourly, and it's stored on Google Storage, Firebase Storage.
I'm not a mobile developer, but is it worthwhile to try and do native look and feel on both iOS and Android in this, or is this like an endeavor you would just give up on?
Okay, so the question is it worth using Flutter if you want a native look and feel on both platforms? So I would say things have shifted a lot in the design space of apps too. I think the last couple of years. Nowadays, almost everybody is kind of building apps with their own design language anyway, and people don't use, even on iOS, like components that look super standard. So when it comes to like date pickers, text fields, stuff like that, everything looks good. Sometimes things lag behind with new OS updates. I think like the date picker on iOS was lagging behind for a while. But you can get that native feel where the animations are crisp and everything is pixel perfect. All of that is easily achievable.
Question about scale and migration. So currently you're doing 500 month
So okay, so the question is, what happens if we scale, if we scale massively? So this comes back to what your business is, right? For us, I don't foresee us going viral and getting millions of users. It's not like that kind of app, and it's not a global app. So we have the constraint of, there's only people in Sweden who have a need of getting a craftsman, and of course we could 10x or 100x. I think that our scale would handle that. If we would go international and need to go like 1,000x or hundreds of x. Currently, I don't foresee that as a problem. I don't think it's a problem with Firebase itself, since if you look at Cloud Functions and Firestore, they can handle that global amount of scale. I think at that point in time, we need to think about architecting for cost, doing more of the kinds of optimizations that I showed here. But I don't foresee that as a problem. And that was actually, when we started out, it was kind of like a fear. What will happen? Will we have to replace all of this in 3 years? And so far, that has not happened. Rather, I think our confidence in the entire Firebase ecosystem, and especially now that Firebase has become more tightly integrated with Google Cloud, we don't have a worry with that, because it's so easy to start exporting your data to BigQuery, to start using Cloud Run instead of Firebase Cloud Functions if you want more control of your server environment and things like that. It's really easy to do that transition. I think since we're running a bit over time, if you have more questions, we can take them in the break. So thank you very much for listening to me. And now it's time for John to have his talk on Meilisearch. So give it up for John.
Alek, will you help me to attaching this one? All right. Hello, everyone. I'm John. I'm working with the Don for 3 years, and today I'm going to introduce the full text search on the Flutter and via Meilisearch. So as Alek mentioned, that the scale is the big problems of the startups, and you are thinking about the small thing for the search. It's a easy thing for your startup, and it might be turns out like a bigger problem afterwards. So for the search, the first thing you are thinking about is using this simple code in there for the searching anything on your database or your the whole text. And afterwards, you are developing your product. You face with the other building blocks instead of using this code. So into a case sensitivity, you need to think about it should be a mistake tolerant, and the filters and the sorts, and it's end up with lots of performance issues. So if we go at and it turns at the end like a full text search actually. So what is the full text search? So it's basically allow you to search anything, not only bind it with the single document. So if you have an object, so you can search every object fields with a single query. That allows you to do that. So it's like a package solution for what I showed you in the previous slide and the building blocks. So when you look at the example, there was a query simple John, and when I search it for this object, it's find it for all of them, and it returns your results. So Alek mentioned that it's a Firebase a great tool for the startups, but of course it's not the perfect thing. It has some limitations. It doesn't support the full text search, basically. So it's a text from the official Firebase documentation, and like for the beginning, you need to apply some turnaround solutions. And there was a code piece, and it's like the directly query to the Firestore and try to receive some information from there. But it has some problems. Like first, it's not case sensitive. You can't make your all documents fields in your Firestore case sensitive. Of course, you can do make the uppercase, lowercase, and that kind of trick, but it's not works it all the time. And you can always face with the exact matches. That is another problem for the queries, and it makes lots of reads at the end. And of course, it might be slow at the end if you have a millions of documents. So we end up with the Meilisearch at the end. Of course, out of our world, there was lots of solutions for that, like the Algolia, and also the mostly known to what was its name? Elasticsearch. Like these two products are like the very big scale. They have millions of customers, and you face with lots of problems in there. Like the Firebase initially direct you these two companies, and you face with some of the problems. Like there is lots of ads everywhere. They are trying to sell you to their cloud platform solution, and it costs you lots of money at the end. So the Meilisearch, it's a French-based a startup. We end up with this company after searching to the others as well, and they are new, and they are basically come up with this self-deploy solution. So you are just downloading their image, and you can basically import it to any cloud services, or you can run it in your local, or you can use your own server. It's free to play actually. So the other thing is the developer-friendly documentation. When you enter their web page, you immediately face with their documentations, and they are pretty nice. And with a couple of steps, you can deploy it to AWS, Google Clouds, and it works perfectly. And what I mentioned, and for the full text search, it contains all of the features like the typo tolerant and fast. And the good thing is that it has a built-in own API management. So for example, you have one thing, it's called let's say books and the movies, but you don't want to show the movies for certain of the customers. And you can create API keys from their CLI, and you can distribute this API key to them. And they couldn't access the books, but they can access the other documents. So and also they have a geocode search. We didn't investigate that, but it's also really useful tool for if you have a database which contains the geocode, so you can do a search based on the distance. And one of the good things they immediately publish their Dart packages. So it makes your building and adapting the Meilisearch, adding to full text search on your product. It's gonna be blaze fast. You just need to add it to Dart package. You don't need to think about any networks. Just add it to your WebRTC server located, and giving the API key, and boom, it works. And also other thing is they have a perfectly great support over the Slack. We just find a problem on their system, and when I type it in there, they answer it immediately, and we fix the solution. For the other things, like the Elasticsearch and the Algolia, their response takes 1 week or something. So how is their architecture on the Meilisearch? And they are the Meilisearch, you can think about a huge database basically, and they are holding to indexes, and indexes contains the documents. So you can assign to the indexes for the API keys, and so you can block the other customers can't, or other users can't see the other indexes. So you can it's a wide open for the adding settings for that. So for creating a document for the Meilisearch, you need to add a primary key first, and it's by default it's an ID, and if you forget to add that primary key, it's probably going to give an error at the end. But for the settings for the indexes, you can change the primary ID with whatever you want. Yeah, it basically works like that, and your data should be a JSON data type. So what is our journey with the Meili? So we are using the as Alek mentioned that we are using the Google Cloud, and we just create one instance from the Google Compute Engine and dump the Meilisearch inside of it. And with the cloud functions, we are migrate our existing data to inside of it, and it starts communicating with the Flutter directly. With the API keys, there is no security issue at all. So for your journey, there are like lots of tutorials for these deployment places, for like the cloud-based websites, and you can go there and you can follow the steps, and you can deploy it your own. So for your, I'm gonna do a demo for you guys, and I'm gonna running into my local machine. So I just skip these steps for you. I'm just installing with the brew to Meilisearch to my computer, and with running the Meilisearch. And I already created an API key for myself. By default, if you are running in a local, it starts with the Meilisearch starts with the dev environment. So you don't need to set a master key. In order to creating API keys, you need to create a master key first. So it's for the demo time. So I'm gonna search it to you, how I extract the data and things. And so I already running the Meilisearch on my local machine, and this is the app I created for you, but I can't see my mouse. Yes. So this is the data I created for you. Maybe I can do it like that. So my index is called users, and it contains the user documents. And the user documents contain these fields. So ID is, by default, is a primary key. And it contains the first name, last name, and email. So let's start with adding a data for our Meili database. So the first step is for the Flutter when you add it to pubdev. So you need to create the client first. So for that one, you need to provide the server URL and the API key which I generated before. And we create the fake data in here with the faker, and it's by the Flutter client. You can add it to any documents to the Flutter to the Meilisearch. So in here, actually, like this thing shouldn't be in the Flutter app. It should be like in the cloud functions. It's just for the demonstrating how it's done, but you can do it in the Flutter as well. So how we are doing the actual search. So this is our search code for the users. So again, I created a client in here. So I think it's better to not creating the client every time. It's better to using this client inserting is a dependency injection. I just built it for this demo like that. And it's after creating your Meilisearch client, it's just one single line. And this is fix your all solutions, all search solutions with a single line code. So let's do a live demo in here. Let's create one user, and it says the Brandy, and let's search him. Brandy, yeah, and it's here. So if you recognize that, when I write Bran in here, it couldn't find it. So it's not typo tolerant because this code is active. So it works like this include method, what I show it in the beginning of the presentation. So when we run it with this one, instead of this guy, oops. So I think like that. Now it starts working without a considering it's the exact word. So yeah, this is the quick demo for the full text search. If you want to see the how sorting and filtering and other stuff works, just visit their web page and their documentations. They are pretty easy, and let's see how you guys gonna build a good Meilisearch products at the end. Yeah, thank you. Any questions?
One
Yeah.
here. This time we have a second one.
Okay. You're searching on collections for Firebase collections here? You pay for reads?
No,
No,
not
misunderstood.
Firebase collections. You need to insert the Meilisearch these collections. Like you need to run the migration at the end. So you need to migrate the data from the Firebase to the Meilisearch database.
Gotcha. Okay.
So how often you have the sync from your Google Cloud to
So if for our case, if there's a breaking change happened, we are running the migration, but we have a on-create functions in the cloud function, so they are handling to migrating the data. For example, let's say we get a new user, and this user data should be in the Meilisearch database as well. So on-create function is doing that job. So it migrates the data to our Firestore to the Meilisearch.
So when you create a user, you create on Meilisearch and your
Exactly.
service as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
So maybe you mentioned this in the beginning. You compared with Elasticsearch, for instance. Could you just say that again? What would be your advantage here using Meilisearch rather than Elasticsearch, for instance?
I think there was a not huge difference. You can always use the Elasticsearch and the Algolia as well. But the thing is, the one of the biggest opportunity for this one is a self-deploy. What I see, they are advertise it on the Meilisearch immediately instead of their cloud solution. They are advertise it to self-deploy, and that's why we are using this one. And it's still a startup, and they have a full focus on their development instead of the huge marketing things. The Elastic is they are full of marketing. When you enter their web page, the ads that use our cloud service, this is not a thing. I like it. Yeah. And also Elasticsearch don't have an official Flutter package. That is the big negative, I can say. Yeah.
Then thank you very much, John.
Right. Thank you.
And now let's take a small 10-minute break before we have the last presentation.
tänkte jag på den där. Om du såg någonting på den här Gitbot som är variabel så de bygger...
All right, everyone, please give it up for Ayman.
Thank you. My name is Ayman Barghout. I work as a Flutter Engineer at Dawn. I mainly take care of the app while also working sometimes with the Firebase, Firestore, and all of that on the side. So today we're going to be talking about how we built video calls in Dawn, or an overview of that. So the outline of the talk is we're going to first talk about the steps of a video call from our apps, or my point of view, kind of, and then an overview of the architecture of calls feature at Dawn, and then comparing a custom solution with WebRTC against something that is a third party like Agora, and then the common challenges and pitfalls we faced while implementing the calls feature. So the steps of video call, it's first there is the initiation from the user who is calling or initiating the call, and then there is like a big part which is the signaling and the negotiation. That mainly happens with WebRTC, and also something like Agora would require some signaling to let the other person know there is a call incoming and let him know which channel he needs to join. And then there is the transmission of media and the streams of audio and video and all of that. That's when the call is ongoing. And then in the end, there is the termination, of course. And this just plays into the architecture overview of how the calls feature is in Dawn. There are three layers, the native Flutter and the app, which is Flutter as well, but it's like the code inside the app itself. And they are basically wrappers of each step. Like for the native side, we have, for signaling, we use Firestore, like as part of our Firebase ecosystem that we use everywhere, which also plays very well with how we implement calls. We'll get into that later. So we use the Firestore SDK, of course, in the native. We don't use it. It's wrapped in Flutter package. Also Agora's SDK and the WebRTC. And for telephony, we use for iOS, the call kit and push kit. And for Android, we use Firebase Cloud Messaging and a custom UI. For the Flutter side, we have wrappers of that, the Cloud Firestore package, of course, and the Agora RTC engine, and the Flutter WebRTC packages. And for telephony, we have our in-house package, which is also open source, Flutter Coolkeep. We used to have like a bigger chunk in the native side, but we have updated the package very recently. Based on another package as well, but with sort of more API changes to fit our use case. And the Firebase Cloud Messaging as well for the telephony on Android in the background. So for the app, we have, for signaling, we have our video call service, which is an abstraction. And we implement it for the different video call services we may use. We currently use WebRTC and Agora. And for telephony, we have our Firebase Cloud Messaging and a call manager, which is like a stateful widget that keeps track of the ongoing calls, if there is an outgoing call, if there is also an incoming call, with the help from Flutter Coolkeep, because these are all events that are fired. So yeah, comparing the custom WebRTC to Agora. First of all, WebRTC, we built this solution using Flutter WebRTC package, which is community developed, and Firestore for signaling. And for Agora, we are using Agora RTC engine with Firestore for communicating as well, and a little bit of cloud function to generate tokens for the Agora, because to join a channel, you need to have a token for security. And going over pros and cons, well, custom WebRTC, the main selling point is that it's free, and also it has a good community support in Flutter, and it has web support. But the downsides are there are no first-part support. This is all community work. It's open source, but there is like not WebRTC itself taking care of the Flutter package. And you need to set up a turn server as well for relaying your connection. And joining a call requires lots of steps. There is like creating the offer and sending it through signaling, and then like lots of steps, and then creating an answer, lots of negotiations going there. While on Agora, it's just like joining a channel, and they handle all of that. It also may not have the best codecs handling. So like if you're using Huawei or something, and you're calling an iOS, you may have a black screen sometimes because the underlying encoding doesn't work or not handled properly. And with all that in mind, there are lots of places where things can go wrong with WebRTC. So for Agora, the plus points is that it has a very generous free tier. It's about 10,000 minutes a month, which is pretty well for for us. The use case is just communicating between like craftsman and customer. It's not a messenger for Meta or something. And it has first-party support. They have 2 packages, which is the Agora RTC engine, which is the base engine where you can, if you have your own custom UI, and they have their Agora UI kit for quickly building like an app for calls. Also joining a channel, as I said, it's very straightforward. You just have the channel ID and have a token that you generate, and you can join very quickly. And they have better codecs handling because that's what they do. They are a video call service provider. For the downsides, it's a paid solution after all. So when you scale, you may need to pay for a plan, and they have some services that are paid, like paid only. And you need to set up like token generation on your server or a cloud function. And they have no web support on the latest version, which is version 6. But they have it planned, but no timeline for it yet. Hopefully soon. But yeah, we had to take our calls on the web down for a bit. So the common challenges we faced when implementing a video calls feature. First of all, you have to nail signaling. You have to make sure that your signaling is working and you're setting correct data negotiation is going well. Sorry. So the video call, here you can see on the diagrams on the right, it's the video call service that is like taking care of creating a peer connection or creating an Agora engine based on which service you'd use. And then this creates the call document. That's the collection we use, calls. And this call document is a single call where all the negotiations and all the information relating to this call is living for the duration of the call. And then lots of negotiation like creating the offer and setting the offer in the call document. And then when the receiving user answers the call, we still update the call document and set the answer on it, and so on. So we use Firestore mainly, whether it's for sharing channel ID or for sharing the offers and the answers for WebRTC. That's the way we do signaling, and it's very reliable so far because Firestore is real time after all. And then you need to have proper permission handling, of course. And that's like the code we use for handling permissions on the right. We just take care of the microphone, camera, and the Bluetooth Connect status permission on Android, only on Android SDK above 30. So yeah, you need to handle them before initiating the call, and when a call is answered, you need to initiate them. You need to handle them as gracefully as possible. So if permissions are not granted, you give like a screen. We need these permissions to start the call. Maybe send the user to settings page of the OS, and all of that. Like this is just for checking, but then you can see how the UX would work after that. For us, if the permissions are not given, we show a dialog, hey, we need these permissions for a call, which is a given, and then we send them to the settings screen if they press a button. You also need reliable telephony to make sure that the receiving end gets the call in every scenario and every time. So we need to make sure that users are notified And for that, we use our package that we maintain, Flutter Callkeep. And this, in the background, uses Pushkit and Callkit on iOS and Firebase Cloud Messaging on, a custom UI that we listen to a background message that there is a call incoming, and we show this UI on the left for Android. But yeah, we need to make sure that it's working in 4 scenarios. When the app is in the foreground, the background terminated with lock screen on as well. And this is a bit challenging, but Flutter Callkeep kind of takes care of these scenarios currently. So why we need Pushkit and Callkit for iOS? Well, because FCM is not very reliable when you're doing VoIP. You need to use Pushkit for iOS to make sure that the calls get through every time. And sadly, there is a limitation for Pushkit. You can't set it up on a package in Flutter. You have to have it in your app delegate. That's how kinda your app delegate would look for Pushkit. You need to register the Pushkit registry and get the token. And then whenever you get a VoIP message, you need to delegate it to the Callkeep Swift plugin, last line there. Display incoming call with this data you get from the Pushkit after you parse name. Also, you need to have a good UI, a non-cluttering UI. If, like for our craftsmen, they are mostly on the go. They need to maybe communicate with multiple customers or reply to a customer while still speaking in a voice call with another. So we have, like in our calls UI, you can minimize the screen and have a thumbnail just floating around, and this thumbnail leaves the rest of the screen like picture in picture, but inside our app only. We will go further in the future, hopefully, and implement it like globally. And that code on the right side is how we have this thumbnail, which is gonna be like the child of this, and like when the corner updates, the animated container takes care of this new corner and updates its location to which side the thumbnail is sprung to. And yeah, this is like basically a small UI, Flutter code for UI that you can put inside your calls function page. Sorry. Also, you need to have reliable voice calls, especially for iOS. You need to make sure that the AV audio session is activated properly before you start a call. And to enable background voice calls in iOS, even when like the lock screen is locked and the app is terminated, is very tricky. That's why, like on the code on the left, that's from the Flutter Callkeep package, which is open source. We have like configure audio session, so we can preheat it when the user answers the call. Otherwise, if you know how Callkit works, if you get a voice call only on the lock screen and you accept the call, the app doesn't open. You'll just be stuck on that Callkit screen until you press the button with your app logo. So if that would be the case, the user would be stuck on a Callkit page with nothing to do until he presses this button. But if you activate the audio session correctly, he would have started the audio call even when the app is not shown yet. So that's very important, which is the part on the left. The part on the right is also if the app is in foreground, if it's iOS, you need to make sure that the audio session is activated before you initiate the call. Otherwise, the audio wouldn't work well. Also, with lots of events, lots of negotiations, and lots of real-time stuff updating everywhere, you get race conditions. So with race conditions, we use the package called synchronized to ensure that every step is executed at the right time. Nothing is executed before the step that should come after it. And if you check on the right, that's from their documentation. That's basically how it is. If you start to methods asynchronously from different places, because that's how it's going to be for events and calls, you can get weird results like 1, 1, 2, 2. But if you use synchronized, it would make sure that every method is locked and the other one is executed after it. So for stuff like WebRTC especially, like this isn't an issue you might face with Agora. But with WebRTC, you need to make sure that some stuff are created before the other. Like you can't start making a call when you still didn't get the answer, or like there are some pitfalls there. Also, wake lock and proximity. You need to ensure good UX when you have video and voice calls. You wouldn't like when you have a video call and then the screen sleeps, or when you have an audio call and you put the phone on your ear just to find that you hanged up the call or whatever. So the, oh, sorry, that's the wrong slide, yep. So the one on the right, that's the utility method we use to toggle wake lock. We use the two packages, proximity screen lock, which enables both of them, wake lock and also proximity sensor. If it's enabled, if it's not enabled, we just enable wake lock, which works on all platforms and all devices. And also capturing frames, taking screenshots is something we needed in our app and our use case, because it's a craftsman that is talking to a customer and maybe he needs to take, he's showing him around the house something he needs to fix and he needs to take like a screenshot of that. So it's very easy to, like with the APIs for WebRTC and Agora as well on the right, to just take a frame, and we use Xfile, which is like cross-platform file package from Flutter, to make it accessible on both web and other platforms on mobile. So we basically just capture the frame, and if you see, both of them have the same name because they are implementing the same abstraction. And for making the jump solid, if you're going from maybe Flutter WebRTC to Agora like we did, it's always important to depend on abstractions rather than concretions. So we have the abstract video call service class, and it's shortened for brevity. But this is the class we implement in both the WebRTC and the Agora video call services. And if we need to maybe like use another service, if Agora doesn't work well, we can do that very easily without changing the UI and other places. And lastly, for the termination of a call, you need to terminate your calls gracefully. You need to make sure you dispose of all your tracks, your streams. If you're using WebRTC, you also release the Agora engine and all the hardware resources it's taking up, like we can see on the code on the right side. And also, whether, like, no matter what service you're using, you still need to make sure you close and cancel all your stream subscriptions and stream controllers if you're using any. And that's the wrap up. So if you have any questions, please. Yeah, we need one last thing is we need to show. Yeah, we need to show the calls feature that I've been talking about. So
You're gonna do it live?
I'm gonna do it live.
That's bold.
That's how we live. So
Are you gonna call me?
yeah, I'm gonna call you, John. It's always you.
Oh no. I didn't know about this.
Reliable telephony. Is it not working or what?
No.
Yeah, live demos.
Never do a demo live.
All right, call me one more time. Yeah.
Yep, it works. First time. And yeah. Welcome. So that's the minimization part that we also talked about. I just need to bump up the brightness because I'm a vampire probably. But yeah, so he can work, he can chat, and also, yeah. And we can have the, oh, where's the camera? Yep, we can turn our cameras to the slides, and we can also use our torch, which wouldn't show up. But yeah, that's about it. Yes.
Yeah, so I didn't get that in the beginning maybe, but did you switch to Agora, or are you just
We are in the
trying
A/B testing phase currently. We have both Agora and WebRTC. Of course, you can't make a call from WebRTC to Agora or vice versa, but we kind of are doing some testing with it currently to see which one is more stable.
But is Agora in production?
Agora is in production.
Okay.
Yeah. Like
Cool.
both of them are in production currently. You mean Agora as a service is in production, or is it in our production?
No, in your production.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Cool.
Both of them are there. It's kind of random A/B testing, and we don't know if you're calling which service you would get right now.
That's why it didn't work the first time.
Could be.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a little bit out of left field. I mean, I've done some stuff with similar things using Zoom, okay?
Yeah.
And like looking at the complexity and the cost and all that stuff, we're actually looking at like third-party integrations, like with WhatsApp, for example, to try to get around a lot of the cost and the development and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because we have applications that could benefit from being able to actually view what's going on, because I figure that's why you're not just using voice call, because you need to see what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, have you ever seen anyone try to do that where they actually just integrate it with WhatsApp somehow, or to try to get around these sorts of issues?
Not really. No, I haven't seen like it. I think it could work, but
you haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it. No.
Right.
But like implementing something like Agora with Agora UI Kit, you can actually get an app with video calling in 2 days.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a question?
There you go.
This looks great, but how would you go about testing this, especially on 2 different platforms?
Oh, that's a very great question. Currently, we do, as Alex said, we are a very small team, and we do testing manually. So there are no stress tests. There are no like big scale automated tests or anything. So we also are like very soon are releasing some kind of an app for us internally, where we would be able to use this feature more, calling maybe like our support team, contacting customers or craftsmen inside the app itself, so we can know if it's working well or not, like have a better insight of any issue, because we will be using it ourselves, and we would like on daily basis, and if there is any issue, we'd be facing it, reporting it, and but yeah, testing, especially calls, is not very easy.
Yeah, cool, thanks.
I can follow up on that just briefly, that like we've experienced like bugs we cannot reproduce on our own several times. In some cases, it's, as Ayman mentioned, it might be a specific device that has a different video codec, or some devices rotate their camera differently, things like that. So it's really tricky to do
like this
testing, even
presentation,
doing it automatically too.
Sorry for interrupting, but this presentation isn't for making a perfect video call, because it's not perfect. It has its own flaws, but it's things we are working on, and these are the learnings we had so far. Any more questions? Awesome.
Nope. All right. Well then, thank you very much, Ayman. And thank you to all of you for showing up tonight and coming here. I believe that Victor want to say something about the next meetup as well. All right. Yeah, you wanted to leave the slide up, right? But so the next meetup will be what date and where?
Yeah, can I switch here?
Yeah. I'll let you take over.
Thank you. And thank Alek and Dan and everyone else who presented tonight. I'll see if I can get this up or no, but you can see it, maybe. So the next meetup will be on in 3 weeks, February the 15th. And there's limited spaces there too. There are more spaces than here, but this got fully booked, so make sure that you book in time. You will actually need to book 1 week in advance for the next meetup. So make sure you do that on time to get in. And between the meetups, you can connect to our Slack. There's a QR code there you can use, so you can, after this meetup, go scan it and make sure you hang out there too, so we can catch up. Yeah. And I want to say a big thank you to everyone who went to the ServerPod meetup a few months ago. That is going to be released on Monday, so you'll be able to watch the video very soon. Yeah, I think we have something there.
Don't miss Flutter Forward tomorrow.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. That's I was going to mention that too. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah. So if you haven't checked that out, there's a big Flutter event called Flutter Forward that is tomorrow. It's like an online event, or I think they're like probably 50 people or something in Kenya, or was it? Yeah, Nairobi. That should be good. And also there was someone posted on our Slack about another meetup, online meetup on, I guess it's on Thursday, which is sort of a follow-up on the Flutter Forward. So maybe you want to check that out too. All right, thank you. See you next time.